Welcome to week 3. I'm Professor Greg Long, and I welcome you today. Our topic is going to be language, media, and the arts. And this is a huge topic, and I know that there's no way to cover everything that we might want, but the hope is that through this lesson that we'll introduce you to a variety of ways of perhaps thinking about things or looking at things that you might not have considered. Before we start, though, let's have our etiquette question for the day. And the etiquette question is, when you are talking to somebody who has a disability, and let's say that's somebody that you don't know well, are there certain topics that you should avoid? So the question is, you're talking to somebody who has a disability, so it's a visible disability. You know about this, you can see it. Is there anything that in talking with them that you should avoid as a kind of a first level of conversation? They're not a close friend. And perhaps one of the most important things you can do from an answer standpoint is not talk about their disability. That one of the things you'll hear from a lot of the guest speakers, and certainly has been my experience with friends over the years, is talking about a person's disability is one of those things that people feel, sure, certainly, let's go ahead and do that. And yet from a personal standpoint, it would be like somebody coming up to me on a daily basis and saying, love your glasses. I know people who have glasses. Let's talk about glasses. It becomes a tiresome subject. So certainly as we think of an etiquette standpoint, don't bring it up. Don't tell people they're an inspiration. I think it'd also be helpful for you to hear this from a couple of our guest speakers as well.
I don't mind talking about my vision. In fact, I enjoy talking about it. My thing is, I don't enjoy talking about it first. I've had a lot of situations where you'll be in a class and someone will come up to you and sit down. It's like, oh, nice to see somebody. And then next thing you know, you become this object of interest that is slowly being filleted, usually by a nursing student. And it's like, well, that's great and all. I'm glad that I'm some sort of anomaly that interests you medically, but I'm also a man with a lot of other things to tell you.
When you meet somebody with a disability, also don't tell them about all the other people you know. Don't say, you know what, my uncle had a disability just like yours. Because again, it's a focus on the disability, whereas you're not really doing anything to learn about the person. So that's today's disability etiquette question. And if you think about the best answer, how should you, talk to somebody with a disability? Say hello, get to know them as a person first. That's your best strategy. Today's topic is one that's a particular interest of mine because I really do believe that language has power. And I will tell you that perspective has evolved over time, because when I was younger, I thought a lot of what we'll talk about as it relates to language is more political correctness than it was meaningful. As I've gotten older, I've come to believe that actually this is not just an issue of political correctness, that what we're really talking about is dignity, respect, ways of interacting with people that show that we interact as equals and that no one's superior, no one's being otherwise degraded. I've got a quote here from George Orwell that you see on the slide that I particularly like. The idea that if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Let me say that again. If thought corrupts language, then language can also corrupt thought. So how we say things truly can make a difference.
The things that I feel like we run into with society is a lot of, media-driven stereotypes, whether it be movies that are dated, like Rain Man, or current TV shows like World of Jinx, where they have the character Chad that has autism. Only having a small amount of airtime for things like that, you only get one or two people to really formulate those stereotypes on. And I think that a lot of those media things set a stereotype for how people think that a person with Asperger's should act, and they're willing to maybe accept the stereotypes that they've seen, but the things that she might display that don't fit into the media stereotypes then seem extra odd, or well, that can't be part of that disability, or that's not really a problem. And we run into we put a lot of effort into, as a family, the behind the scenes work. It takes 2 hours to get her hair ready to go out, or spending those hours scripting, when you walk up to the Dairy Queen window, this is how you order the chicken strips. They're going to ask this, you need to say this. And the people see this neurotypical functioning, this girl that looks like she's your average 17-year-old, but no one understands, that there's behind the scenes work that goes into that to avoid some of those stereotypes, I guess. Well, I think a big thing with media is that there's a lack of knowledge out there for autism and for Asperger's. It is fairly new. It's not something a whole lot of people have a whole lot of information on. So when it's portrayed in the media, it's usually done very blindly. So maybe it's an instance in the news where somebody has Asperger's or autism and they've done a crime or something of that nature, and it kind of gets portrayed as all people that have this are dangerous. And I've noticed, for conversations with her and also through being a teacher, that can be very confusing, not only for the people who are reading these things and don't have any more information than what they're seeing in the newspaper, but also for the students themselves. And they struggle with an identity piece anyway. What does this disability mean about me? Who am I? And when the media portrays something like them being dangerous because someone who had this disability committed a crime, they may question their own self. Is this my future? Am I dangerous? Or a concern that, oh no, people are going to think I'm dangerous. People are going to think I'm scary, and I'm really not.
Think about these words, for example. Wheelchair bound, afflicted with, suffers from. Now, if you think about how we hear people talk, those are fairly common kinds of expressions when we think about disability, and yet when we think about somebody who uses a wheelchair versus someone who is confined to it or bound by it, very different image. Somebody who is afflicted or suffers, no, they have a disability. How we talk, the language we use, makes a difference. And I would say, too, that some words are particularly hurtful. And I hesitate to use this, but the word retard, that is a very offensive word for lots of people. Issue here is we use it far too frequently. And just because it's used regularly, does that mean that it's not hurtful? And so the perspective that we would take is, I can't force you to say one thing versus another, but if you're aware that using certain words can be hurtful to others, then it's probably a good idea to try to avoid it. So certainly as we think about the R word, I'd like to share with you some family members' perspectives on this. I've got a couple of siblings and a parent who will talk to you about how they see the R word and the impact it has on them.
I really don't like the word retard. That one comes up a lot, and I have had those kind of situations where someone has said like, oh, well, but you have a retarded sister, and they're not necessarily meaning to be rude, but a lot of times what happens in those situations is I end up having to kind of like give a teachery speech or be a little informative, and it can give you an appearance of being maybe like crass or arrogant. So I've had that issue, but otherwise language, when it comes to Asperger's specifically, I haven't really run into a whole lot of problems with. It's more the R word.
I'm fortunate to have another colleague in the middle school that I work at that is also very aware of person-first language. And so between the two of us, we've been able to hit just about every person that says the autistic kid or the LD kid. We've been able to reframe that language to the point where people now, instead of saying, what, or, oh, I didn't mean anything, they now say, oh, right, thanks for reminding me. So I feel like we've been able to make a big change with that. With the students, this still, it's that pervasive R word that still is really available to them, and they need some direct instruction on the inappropriateness of using that word.
Well, with the person-first language, I'm not really sensitive on it. I got enough going for me already. So I typically always let that slide, except I'll always demonstrate person-first language as much as I can, and just hope that kind of catches on. When it comes to the word retarded, that's always been a difficult one with me, with other people. Is one is when everyone uses it correctly, the relatively slow and emotional, physical, and intellectual development. Is being that's what people actually have, and when you use it in that context, that's fine. But that doesn't happen so often. What happens more so often is it's just used as a casual substitute for stupid, or as also an insult. And that's always really frustrated me because I think it's because of having a sibling with disabilities. By doing that, by using their condition as a means to insult somebody else, it's in a subtle way belittling that whole community as a whole. And it helps also like set how people are going to look at people who actually are retarded. You know, it's almost like that they become like less of a person. And you know, the hard part about doing this is one, not getting angry at the person using these as casual insults or substitutes, and also like trying not to come off as being on a high horse. You know, that's one of the biggest things I struggle with.
So as we end this first segment, the point that I wanted to really emphasize and that I hope is the take-home for you is language has power. How we express ourselves, what we say, makes a difference, not only in terms of how people perceive us, but as how they understand you and how they feel about themselves when you talk with them. So language has power.